When Neil Druckmann took the stage at Summer Games Fest 2022, he gave Naughty Dog multiplayer fans hope, finally, for the future of The Last of Us multiplayer. This game is going to be huge, with a story and characters, and most of all, it seems that Naughty Dog is finally getting serious about their multiplayer games with this first standalone dedicated entry. And multiplayer fans should be hyped about this because we have always kind of felt undervalued and overlooked in Naughty Dog fandom. But I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't fearful, especially with some of the recent news, which has prompted me to do some reflection. Dr. Pooplove here, and today I want to talk about why I am worried about The Last of Us Factions 2. And stick around to the end because I do want to offer a little bit of hope after getting into all of these fears, but let's get right into it. And the first thing I'm worried about is that Naughty Dog is going to make design choices that radically change some of what made the original Factions so special. The original Factions had a slower pace than most multiplayer shooters, and the aiming is fairly unique in that you have less bullets and it's not really a twitch shooter like Call of Duty, but you are still able to get around fairly smoothly. The shooting is highly satisfying and you don't really feel too over encumbered by anything. And I think they struck a nice balance that really fits this game. But the way that Naughty Dog has designed their most recent Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 has been to ground the player movement and aiming even further into the direction of realism. Your movements are even clunkier and aiming is heavier, and honestly it just doesn't feel right. Little things like not being able to reload while performing an action or slower vaulting honestly just kind of makes these newer Last of Us games less fun, especially for those who like to inhabit a more aggressive playstyle. Even the smaller damage indicators when you hit your target are really small and they're hard to see, and as a result it's much less satisfying. And so I worry that Naughty Dog is going to carry some of these design choices over into the multiplayer. And look, I fully expect Naughty Dog to make changes, and I think all of us have to come to terms that it's not going to be exactly the same as the original Factions, but certain things like these are going to be much more impactful to the player experience than others. And my next worry, if it were to be true, would make it much harder to try to have Naughty Dog make any fixes to these changes. And that is that Naughty Dog might not listen to or engage with their community in a meaningful way that allows them to have a pulse on what their community actually wants. And this fear is, well, based on their track record. Uncharted 4 multiplayer, for instance, was great in my mind, but it was notable how Naughty Dog made some significant changes to the Uncharted multiplayer DNA that deviated from their first two entries, and that seemed to be pretty out of touch with what their already built-in fan base was hoping for. And consider certain things in Factions, like the addition of the tactical shotgun, which was clearly aimed at trying to bring in new players, and that's good for maintaining a healthy player base. But this was immediately despised by the community, who had been complaining about shotguns and shorties to a large degree already. And anyone paying any attention to the community at all would have known that this was maybe not the best solution to try to bring in new players. But they still went ahead with this change, and the addition ultimately changed the way Factions has been played ever since. It's been a major point of rage in this game's tenure. And it's also been kind of weird to me that Naughty Dog is working on this brand new multiplayer, but has not tried to do anything to kind of maintain their current multiplayer fan bases that are currently keeping Factions and Uncharted multiplayer alive. Both of these games are riddled with all these cheats, and yeah, maybe they don't have time to make any patches, but it would have been nice if they at least said something or even just did anything to really acknowledge this fan base in any meaningful way like the single player fan base gets every day. The multiplayer fan base gets largely ignored, almost as if we don't exist. I mean, yeah, we have been waiting patiently for a long time, and all this just kind of makes me worried that Naughty Dog is going to be out of touch and are not really interested in appealing to their current hungry fan base, but rather only to a new audience. And that leads me to my third worry, which is the growing toxicity surrounding The Last of Us in general, and how that can actually really hurt this game. Factions has its own elements of toxicity, but it kind of pales in comparison to the overall looming cloud of toxicity surrounding The Last of Us as a property in general. I mean, look, I had my issues with The Last of Us Part 2, but I got over it, and some people have made it like some life goal to rip on Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann at every turn. And I can tell that half of these people didn't even play that game. And so I worry, is this kind of hatred and toxicity going to flood in when Naughty Dog's next Last of Us centered multiplayer comes out? And will this toxicity push Naughty Dog even further into not communicating with their multiplayer fans? With multiplayer games, it's essential for devs to hear criticism because the game is constantly updating and not everything is going to be balanced. Will this toxicity drown out the community's ability to communicate constructively towards Naughty Dog? And will this aura of toxicity keep new players out and hurt the player base? Something really has to be done on this front. And then, of course, there is the elephant in the room, and that is Sony. And my worry is that Sony is going to be pressuring Naughty Dog to fill this game with some money-making tactics. Of course, we recently saw a job posting suggesting that this game may be free to play in some capacity, and we also found out that Naughty Dog recently hired someone from Fortnite's monetization design team that helped design the battle pass to help them with this game. And honestly, some of this is to be expected, because this is how multiplayers generally are these days. And Naughty Dog definitely needs to make money from the players somehow. So microtransactions are inevitable. But Sony has been making some pretty shrewd moves that make me nervous for what they have in store and that they may go too far. Now, I don't think we would actually have to pay for guns this time around, as the criticism for that from the original factions was very strong, and I definitely think they got that point. But I worry about Sony pressuring Naughty Dog to do what some of these other popular multiplayers do. Like, will the players be cartoonized to look more like Fortnite? And how will Sony be able to resist some of the ridiculous potential cosmetic items? Factions 2 hopefully is tonally aligned to the world of The Last of Us. And if you look at the skins that they incorporated into The Last of Us remake that you can put on Joel and Ellie and their guns, these actually seem to be a model for pretty reasonable cosmetic options. But will Naughty Dog ultimately have to cave at the money-making potential to sell a $20 Kratos skin, or flooding cosmetics with brand names and logos? Honestly, it will be hard, I think, for Sony to leave that money on the table in the interest of preserving the sacredness of The Last of Us IP. And I think I'd be really disappointed if we were to see that happen with Factions 2. Okay, so yeah, I just went kind of hard there with the doom and gloom. And honestly, I think I went a little bit overboard because I don't think all of this will happen, but I think it's just good to kind of get some of these fears out there into the wild so as to hope they don't come true. And look, while I think there may be some stuff to get worried about, we haven't seen much, and so we need to wait and just have a little faith. This game is being developed by, well, the best studio out there, and by people who love this game and love multiplayer. And Naughty Dog does everything with intention, and despite some flaws, they have created some of the best multiplayer experiences ever. And with the recent Bungie acquisition, I also think that they may help steer this game game in the right direction by helping Naughty Dog not make certain mistakes that they have made in the past. And while I do also think that hiring someone who worked on Fortnite might be kind of a double-edged sword, at least, Fortnite is super successful and that game has been going on for years, and so the thought that Factions 2 could potentially survive and thrive for a lot longer than the original Factions is fairly encouraging, as well as the fact that Naughty Dog seems to be playing to their strengths by trying to incorporate a story. But some of you may be wondering why I didn't list the various hints of a battle royale coming to this game in my list of worries, because I know that is something that many people have fears about, and I definitely have some thoughts about the potential of a battle royale coming to this game, and that's why you should check this video out that goes over the possibilities of that. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.